hiring talent as a revenue leader, that's my number one job. And I think, especially for VPs that are coming up, one of the hardest things to come to terms with, because it's hard to understand at the beginning, your job is to hire people better than you are. And like some people have a really hard time with that. I believe in leading with empathy. If you ask most people that have ever worked with me or for me, like I definitely lead with my heart. I lead with empathy. I try to always remember like what the job is like. When you're when you're my age and have been doing this for so long. I haven't directly sold in a long time, so I try to remember what it was like, and like as a individual contributor, what did I appreciate and not appreciate. And I think in my philosophy is, if you dumb everything down to the most basic levels, I think there are two types of revenue leaders in the world. I think there are ones that lead numbers first and people second, and there are ones that lead people first and numbers second. I like to think that I'm the latter. I think like if in theory, if you take care of the people and you lead people and give them the chance to be successful, the numbers should, in theory, take care of themselves. I really kind of shy away from the spotlight. I really want to give people credit. They're the ones out there doing the battles and fighting the wars. But yeah, I really I let people in, I let people get to know me. And I try to get to know people, at a deeper level, just because, they're human beings, and in sales, we're all a little fragile.
Understood. Experience a lot of rejection too, so we need a nice home.
Totally.
There's two really interesting things that you raised there. Now, numbers, I assume you mean quota, really.
Correct. Yeah.
Correct. Cool. I want to flip that though, and this is not what you're meaning by it, but I do want to flip it into data. Because data, as you know, the conversations around data are growing, and how much data is playing into sales teams growing. And I'm interested to see how you entwine that with your human-led approach, and whether they work together at all, or whether perhaps we should leave one at the door sometimes. And the empathy piece, let's start there. Actually, it's a good number.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I think like it's interesting. I would say I don't think there's a clear-cut answer to that. And I'll tell you why. Because, being in sales and revenue, the world in which we exist, we're one of the only parts of an organization that we're judged in complete black and white. You either make your number or you do not. But we live in total gray, right? The sales process that we think we control, like, our job is to like put ourselves and our company in the best position to win. But it's not like we're putting a gun to someone's head and saying, hey, buy this. I demand that you buy this, right? And like they ultimately have to make their own decisions. So I think, when it comes to the data, there's several different factors. One, you got to know kind of what's going on in this person's life. Like, are there things going on? But it all does come back to the number. So the data, the data story just kind of weaves itself in regardless. But I also think you have to understand, what is happening in this person's life. So for example, if you have like a number one rep, they've been a number one rep all of their lives, and all of a sudden they're not, something might be going on that you don't know about, right? So you have to like drive the data conversation. But I think those conversations are easier if you know the person and kind of what's going on in their life. So you can kind of mentor them on the data piece and the numbers, but also show empathy and care that you actually do care what's going on in their life. Because you never know, right? Like, especially with COVID, like everybody's got levels of stress that we've never seen before. So I think it's really important to understand not just the numbers, but also kind of what is this person going through.
Personal context. Yeah, sounds like too. It's the trajectory or it's the trend in the data that's really
absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah,
and I don't like I'm not one of those guys where this person just missed a quarter, so You know, I'm much more of like, what is the trend? What are the trends, right? Like this person's been top rep for 2 years and now all of a sudden they've missed 2 quarters. Like, let's dive into this a little bit deeper and kind of see what is happening. You know, I think data can drive you towards a decision. I don't think it actually is the decision in regards to people themselves.
Yeah, really well handled, I think, there, Matt. Let's flip this on its head. Let's not have the highest performing rep, but through our analysis, our person-to-person intelligence, we've found a rep who we think can be very successful, but they're not just quite yet. How do we keep the faith ourselves, and how do we get them to keep the faith to continue, so they can be the performer you think they're able to be?
Yeah, so that's a great question. I think it's a couple things. One, you know, I always tell people, like, look, as a salesperson, if you're missing your numbers, right? If you're putting in the effort and you're putting in the thought and strategy, I can defend that all day long, right? But if you're not doing your part, like there's not a lot to discuss. So I think it's a matter of ensuring that they're doing kind of what needs to be done. Like one of the things that I say to people is like, you know, if you can look yourself in the mirror every day and say, you know what, I did everything I could do to try to be successful today, you probably did. If you can't say that honestly to yourself, you probably need to figure out like, what else can I be doing, or can I be doing differently to change things up? You know, I think that the effort has a lot to do with it. Grit has a lot to do with it. But I also think, you know, by getting people to believe in themselves, you know, you have to show that you believe in them. Right. And if you don't, then that's where the hard conversations happen. Right. Yeah. Where you go on pips or whatever. But like, you know, like and like I've had previous conversations with people of like, you know, I'm a pretty casual, relaxed leader, but I definitely have moments where, you know, I get into a zone and it's jarring for people because I'm so casual. But then when I just get zeroed in, people are so like not taken aback, but like I kind of shock them into reality, for lack of better words. And after these conversations, they've gone on to be the best reps at the company. But I think under it all, they know who I am as a person, and they know I'm doing it because I care. I'm not doing it just to be an asshole. Like I'm doing it because I care, and I want them to be successful, not for the company, but for themselves.
Yeah, really well handled. To make levity of this, it's almost like when one of your parents switches tones and very suddenly you remember you don't want to be back in that place with them, but in a much more serious way, of course. Yeah. So coming on to VPs of sales, Matt, to be frank, and obviously this is quite a challenging topic, but we know the context of the VP, especially in tech. We know that the average tenure is about 12 to 18 months. And then the big question then for the CRO is, how do we make this role ace? So let's start with this. What makes a great VP of sales?
I think it's, you know, you have to be a leader, right? And I don't think, you know, I think there are natural leaders out there for sure, but I also think that there are ones that, you know, you can mentor and become leaders. I think you have to be a leader. I think that you have to know how to hire, right? Like to me, hiring talent, you know, that is, as a revenue leader, that's my number one job. And I think, you know, especially for VPs that are coming up, one of the hardest things to come to terms with, because it's hard to understand at the beginning, your job is to hire people better than you are, right? And like some people have a really hard time with that. And so I think like being able to hire the right talent, I think being able to enable people to be successful and not have to have an ego that, you know, I have to be right? Like my style is when I have my leadership team together, I don't really care who's right or wrong. I just care that we get to what we believe is the right decision. So like by doing that, not only am I enabling people to be heard, but they're also learning how to have these conversations and learning how to like, you know, come to decisions when scaling a fast growing or just a growing company. You know, I've been known to have, you know, a leadership team meeting and, you know, trying to figure something out. And I'll just kind of like throw out a topic, for lack of better words, and like just let people discuss. Now, some people in my past have said I let that go on too long, but like, it's important for me to A, make sure people are heard, but B, like, there might be an idea out there that no one's thought of, and all of a sudden it's thrown out there and we go, ooh, wait a minute, that's actually interesting. Let's dive into that. Because I don't like, I don't pretend to have all the answers. I don't think anybody has all the answers. So like, my job is to formulate and build a team that together we can come up with the answers to scale a company. And I think that's a really hard, especially if you're younger and coming up. Like, that was one of the hardest things I had to learn, hiring people better than I am. I'm like, what is that? I'm VP of sales. Like, but the reality is that is our job on any level of leadership, is to hire people better than you are.
Yeah. I want to come back to that because it's a good point.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it sounds like you're saying we need to be able to transfer ownership.
Mm-hmm.
Raises another good question. What are the first responsibilities you might give a VP to stretch test them or pressure test them beyond their usual brief? And how do you keep on top of
that? I think one of the is to have them sit in another department for a little while and learn some of the business. Even at Spiff, the company I'm at now, I think, like, when you look at the company as a whole, you're better off. Like, so for example, probably 3 or 4 months ago, we had a big deal and it wasn't a good fit for our company in general. There was gonna be a lot of custom work, blah, blah, blah. And I told the rep, and I'm like, we're walking from this. Like, it'd be an amazing deal, but it would put too much stress on the rest of our company. And we're just not ready for that yet. And that's okay. Like, we'll go find another one and we'll go win that one. But I think you have to look at the company as a whole and not just be focused on chasing deals, because if all you're doing is chasing deals, you could chase some wrong deals and that aren't actually, from a longer term perspective, great for the company. The deal of the moment is great, but long term, it could do more damage than anything else.
Yeah, such a great point though, because when we think about sales, the rise to leadership in sales is quite fascinating, because you go from individual contributor, you're absolutely set on meeting your target. And like you said, you bring in other strands, you think cross-departmentally, you think strategically more within the organization than you might have done. You think about hiring people, transferring ownership, and suddenly you're being asked to do way different skills than you were just doing as a rep. Yeah. Interested to see if you agree, or maybe I'm wrong. And then also how we train not train, but enable VPs of sales to be able to do that. And also, well, your experience doing that, having been a VP from rep to CRO.
Yeah, I have been incredibly fortunate and blessed to have like some pretty amazing mentors throughout my career that have really taught me a lot, all the way going back, 20 years ago to Embarcadero Technologies. And at kind of each one of my steps, I've just been blessed with amazing mentors that have taught me a lot. And so, like, because of that, I try to like pay it forward as much as I can. And I try to like mentor people that I've worked with or people that I know, because, most of the times, especially in a startup, right, first time VPs are literally just kind of thrown into it. Like, there's the swimming pool, there's the deep end, you're in it, like, go figure it out. And so, like, I think that, kind of going back to the tenure of like an average VP of sales is in place for 12 to 18 months. I think that's part of the reason why, right? They're just kind of like, you get these first time people, they haven't had the experience yet. And so they're just kind of thrown into the deep end. And most of the time, that's not a good recipe for success, right? Like, even as a CEO, like, you've got to mentor people. And like, one of the things that I look for when I'm looking at a new opportunity is like, will the CEO and I be a good partnership? And will this person have my back if and when needed? Because it's like, in a growing company, there's always rough patches. It's never like smooth. It's never smooth sailing all the time. And so I think that matters. Like, finding a partner like that really, really matters. And like, I was at my last company for 4 years, grew the sales team from 5 to like 120. The time before that was in the average of 18 months, but the CEO and I just weren't good partners. And that was one of the main reasons why it ended. But I think like that's part of what I try to tell people, like especially when you're going after your first like VP gig, Like you're so interested in getting the title and moving up the ladder, but the reality is you should be looking for the right partner. Like who is the right CEO for you, and who will like stand by you and have your back during good times and rough times, because rough times are bound to happen in many different forms. So I think like that's what I try to tell people as people start to go venture out into their first VP gig. I really tell people like, make sure it's a great opportunity, but also make sure it's the right CEO for you and the right partner, because it really is a partnership, 100%.
Appreciate your transparency there.
Yeah.
So noted, partnerships are essential, especially for your first gig. And when this doesn't happen, that's maybe sometimes when we see those briefer tenures a little bit.
Yeah.
What does it bring, Matt, the partnership? What does it bring to your life and your role, and how you can grow that sales team from 5 to 120?
It brings a few things. I think it brings like confidence, right? Brings a sense of confidence for you to know that you're supported. I think that it brings some safety in taking risks every now and then. But I also think like, just having a partner and being able to like talk through things. And, I think that every leader needs a vent somewhere, right? Because it is a stressful job. And you need an outlet just to get it out, like just get it out of my system, get it out of my head. And I think, when a CEO and revenue leader are able to do that with each other, I just think like, you learn a lot about things that you might not have learned about, but also you form a bond where you're in the war together, right? And you're in the trenches trying to figure things out. So I think it's the safety, the mental safety that it brings can be long-standing. And I think that in itself kind of enables revenue leaders to go out and like try things, right? They might not work, but as long as you learn from it and you change quickly, if it's not working, you're fine. But I think you have to have that kind of mental comfort, knowing that like I mean, obviously if you just totally blow it, like that's one thing, but not everything's going to be perfect all the time, and like, you have misses in hiring, especially when you're growing really fast, you're going to have misses. And, having a CEO that has the confidence in you and the trust in you to not react to those things, I think is really important. Because you're not going to get it right all the time. Nobody does.
Yeah, it's been the theme of discussion, hasn't it? Either with our own reps as CRO or even being a VP CRO, it's about creating a sense of safety for people.
Correct. Yeah. And because nobody's like a superhuman, as much as a lot of people think they would like to be.
But it's just nuts because fast growth SaaS is so crazy.
It is. And I think like but that's a key point. Yeah. I think like growing a company like this, you're running really, really fast all the time. And so you're bound to have misses. You're bound to make mistakes because you're moving so fast. Like right now we, as we think about growing, like we're going through a process of like, like how do we scale the revenue team? How do we segment? Do we do these things? And like we're pouring through a ton of data, but gotta make sure we get it right. And so kind of going back to the data theme, I think that's where it all kind of comes together. I think you've got to figure out like how do you run fast but also slow down just enough where you're actually putting some thought into things.
Yeah, absolutely. It's kind of the big thing to decide in fast growth. Absolutely. Final question for you, Matt.
Yes,
if you're in a room full of CROs or even CEOs, whoever, the best to ever do it, what would you ask them?
Ooh, that's a juicy one. I would ask them, what was your biggest learning for yourself of your strengths and weaknesses? Like how did you try to improve on the weaknesses, or did you?
Interesting.
Because I think like that's the thing, like, you know, even so at each one of my stops, like I've learned something new about myself, about leadership, about, you know, just how this whole process works. But, you know, it's made me better, and I internalize things like that and try to improve, you know, like, and I kind of look at my career and it's like each stop got me ready for the next one.
Yeah. But when we self-evaluate and we consider what that stop meant, and we look ahead to whatever the next thing is. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. And like, you know, I think appreciating, you know, I guess the last thing I would say is, you know, one of the things I talk about with a lot of people is like when you're building these companies, you know, a lot of people look for the one, right? Everybody's looking for the big one, and most people don't find it. But I think like the one thing that people don't really talk about is like the bonds that you make with people, they last forever because you're in the trenches, you know people intimately, and like these relationships that you build with people can affect your life and your career forever. And I think like that's where the human factor really comes into play at a fast growing company, because you're all just in it. whether you want to be or not, you are in it. And so, you know, I think the human element of all of it is really like the most special thing about building companies like this, because you just build such strong relationships. Like even if I think about my relationships, you know, 20 years ago, you know, there was a group of us at Success Factors that was there in the beginning. And you know, I think like we don't talk as much as we used to, but I think if any of us need each other, we'd all be on planes within 5 minutes, right? And I think like that's the cool stuff, right? Career, all that stuff, I think that's normal, but it's those long lasting friendships that you make that are really cool.